Let me introduce the former governor and of the state of New Mexico, and maybe another future presidential candidate or president of the United States, Gary Johnson.
Thanks. Oh. So I got an email the other day from one of my good friends and supporters in Florida, and he said, I saw a new bumper sticker. And as a little background, Big Boy, the rapper from Outkast, was being interviewed, and the interview was, do you still experience racism? And he said, yes, I do. When's the last time you experienced racism? Well, just the other day in the airport, a woman came up to me and said, your guy won, Obama. You must be happy about that. Big Boy responded, bitch, I voted for Gary Johnson. Bumper sticker, bitch, I voted for Gary Johnson. I'm going to offer up some advice this evening, throughout this evening, and the advice is worth exactly what you're paying for it, nothing. So take all of this with a grain of salt. I would like you to all look at life as a journey and not a destination. If you look at life as a destination, you're just going to be disappointed. That's just a fact. Last week, at this very time, I can't believe they had this event, but it was the National Championships for 24-hour mountain bike racing. And I was doing that a week ago right now at this time. And there are people that would say, well, gosh, you must have trained, you know, all this effort into the event. Life is not about the event. Life is not about the destination. It's about the journey. And so I put myself in a position to be able to do that event at any time. And that's my life, and that's my journey. I like to think of my life as a movie. I watch the movie every night. I'm the star, I'm the producer, I'm the director. Do I like what I see? And if I don't like what I see, who's in charge? Who's the star? Who's the director? Who's the producer? It's me. So look at your life as a movie. Do you like what you see? Great. And you should. But if you don't like what you see, there's one person in charge of that. Another thing, anything that can go wrong will go wrong. Plan on that in your life, okay? Just make that part of the plan. I broke my leg prior to going to Mount Everest. You know, I could have crawled up on the couch and said, well, this is just meant to be, or I could have gone to Everest with a healing broken leg, believing that it was going to heal before it actually got around to happening. But I think in all of our lives, we are faced with adversity all the time, and there are two ways that we can deal with that adversity. One is to crawl up and feel victimized. Another is, it happened again. I'm going to take control of this, and I'm going to make the best out of it. I got a wonderful family. I have two great kids. Saya is 34, Eric's 31. I'm in love with Kate Prusak. I think at some point she's going to marry me. This has been going on for a long time. My son is going to get married to a wonderful young lady, Lauren. We all went to South America over Christmas and New Year's to climb Aconcagua, which is the highest mountain in South America. Now, in line with things happen all the time that you don't expect, on Summit Day, we got up at Summit Day. We left at 4:50 a.m. from 20,000 feet to go to 23,000 feet. And the temperature was, with the wind chill, I want to say minus 50 degrees. We get to 21,000 feet, and the guide sits down, plops himself down, and I said, "Are you okay, man?" And he said, "No, I'm too cold. I'm going back down." It took me about 10 seconds to realize that this is great. I'm going to get to tell this story the rest of my life. How do we get to the top, man? We're still 6 hours to go. Can we find our way to the top? No. You know, you need to wait for this guy in back of us, and he'll take you up, but I'm too cold. I'm going back down. We wait an hour. It is so cold. I mean, feet are falling off, fingers falling, anything with exposed skin. It's horrible. He gets up there, and the first thing he says is, "I don't want to have anything to do with these people. I got my own people." Shortly after that, I mean just shortly, minutes, a guide and a climber come over the top who I'd actually made friends with on the way up. I didn't know that this was their summit day, but they said, without qualm, "Join us, come to the top." Everything ended up working out. Body parts all worked out. Here's some more advice. Again, it's worth what you're paying for it, all right? Whatever it is that you do in your life, whatever it is, whatever your passions are, what you like to do, job-wise, apply it entrepreneurially. Become your own boss. There's nothing more rewarding than doing for yourself what so many of us end up doing for others. The rewards are 100-fold, and when jobs get talked about, create your own job. I've been an entrepreneur my entire life. I started a one-man handyman business in Albuquerque, me, in 1974, and actually grew it to employ over 1,000 people. It's amazing when you show up on time and when you do what you say you're going to do. But I learned a couple of things being in business, and these things were very, very important to success. One is tying people to the bottom line. Getting everybody pulling in the same direction, sharing in the profits. And when you share in the profits zoom. They don't contract, they zoom. And the other thing that I learned is I may have hired and fired more people than anybody else in this room because of the amount of employees that I had and my experience as governor of New Mexico. I will tell you that it's really, really easy to hire people. But it's really, really difficult to fire people. There's nothing more difficult than firing people. But if you can't fire people, you end up failing. They end up taking home the piggy bank at the end of the day, and you end up failing. So you have to learn to fire people, and it's horrible, and it's not that they're bad, it's just things don't work out. So that is a very, very valuable lesson that I have learned. And this is really the breakdown in government, is we elect people who have no government or have no experience in the private sector, and so they're in a position where, wow, hiring is really easy, and I'm only hiring the best people. Well, it doesn't always work out, and if you don't have the experience to fire people, if you can't fire people, it just doesn't work. Mitt Romney says during the debates, he said, "I love firing people." That's the difference I have with Mitt Romney. I hate firing people, but I probably fired more people than Mitt Romney. What's money? Money for me has always represented freedom. The ability to do what you want to do, when you want to do it. So I sold my business in 1999. Nobody lost their job. That business is doing better than ever. And here's a little game that I play quite often. What if I had all the money in the world? If I had all the money in the world, I would build a dream home close to as good a skiing as anywhere on the planet, like Taos, New Mexico. In that dream home, I'd have the biggest big screen TV that money could buy. I'd turn the music up really loud all the time. I'd drive a Porsche. I would eat really well. I'd become a really good cook. I would be ultra fit. I would go from one adventure to another. You know what? I have all the money in the world. I'd be a political activist. It's something that I enjoy. I am the former governor of New Mexico for 2 terms. I really made a name for myself vetoing legislation. I may have vetoed more legislation than the other 49 governors in the country combined. That's how many bills I vetoed. And I'm always asked about, well, gosh, you must have made mistakes when it came to the vetoes. Yeah, I didn't veto enough bills is what it amounted to. I am proud of the fact that because of my vetoes, not 1 penny of entitlement liability got added to New Mexico taxpayers. Not 1 penny. But unintended consequences. You think you're in there. You think you have this great opportunity to shrink government. So I vetoed legislation that would have established the Martin Luther King Commission because I just didn't want to grow government and I didn't want to appropriate money to the Martin Luther King Commission. And I also vetoed Indian Affairs Commission because I didn't want to spend money. I didn't want to grow government to make that happen. So they come back to me after a number of vetoes in both of those categories and they say, we can do this without any money whatsoever. We surrender to your smaller government. Great. I sign the legislation, no money involved, none, zero, zip. Guess what? I leave office. I leave office and these commissions are in place and now they've burgeoned. I grew government. I was responsible for growing government. Public Regulatory Commission in New Mexico. Make it a bill to make it elected. I thought, well, gosh, this is going to add accountability. It has become a behemoth in New Mexico. It's become the opposite. Every wannabe governor in the state is running for the Public Regulatory Commission before being governor. It's horrible, and I did it. Government is well-intentioned, but there are always unintended consequences. Sign motorcycle helmet legislation requiring motorcyclists to wear helmets. You're reducing the donor population significantly. Unintended consequence. Reckless driving. You know how government deals with reckless driving? It's speed limits. Well, speed limits don't do anything to reckless driving. Speed limit can be 55 miles an hour, and at certain times, 55 miles an hour is reckless driving. At other times during that same space, you could be driving 100 miles an hour safely. Well, I hate speed limits. I think that's one of the... Do you know that after the Enron debacle, Sarbanes-Oxley passed Congress? Well, one of the caveats of Sarbanes-Oxley was mark-to-market accounting. You got to mark your assets at what they're valued. Now, looking at that, I lost a small fortune personally in Enron because of all this. But mark-to-market accounting, this was going to prevent an Enron from ever happening again because you had to mark your assets according to the market, and if you didn't, you were going to go to jail. So in 2008, in the mortgage securities market, there was one trade in late December that traded at 5 cents on the dollar for $180,000 in a multi-trillion-dollar market, and the entire portfolio of all major banks, of all mortgage securities, went to 5 cents on the dollar, even though the yield was more than 5 cents on the dollar, and it precipitated the collapse of 2008. So even the most well-intentioned legislation has unintended consequences. So given all of my success, and I say that tongue-in-cheek, why not run for President of the United States? And the reason I ran for President of the United States, I really think that I was the most qualified. I really think that I'd have done a better job than any of these people. I do. I really think that I would be President of the United States if I would have just been heard, if I'd have just been given an opportunity. And I base this on isidewith.com. Did any of you go to that website, isidewith.com? You went to the website, you answered 36 questions, you got paired up with the presidential candidate most in line with your views. 3.5 million people did this, and based on that website, I was the next President of the United States. I ran as a Republican. I didn't get into the debates because I wasn't in the polls that determined who got in the debates. I became the Libertarian nominee for President of the United States, and the message didn't change. Speaking with a broad brush stroke, I think libertarians are fiscally conservative. I think libertarians are socially accepting / tolerant. I think libertarians speak for non-military intervention. And I think that fits the profile of most Americans. Governance should occur under strict adherence to the U.S. Constitution. I think elected Democrats, and I'm talking about elected Democrats now, not registered Democrats or registered Republicans, but elected Democrats, I don't think they could balance a checkbook if it bit them on the ass. And elected Republicans, you know what? They want to socially engineer our lives to look like a Norman Rockwell painting. If left unchecked, elected Republicans would pass legislation providing for the death penalty if you tried to commit suicide. So, how do I view the issues? Let's start with taxes. And by the way, I just applaud all of you for the positions that you take and you espouse. But when it comes to taxes, I would like to see the income tax eliminated, corporate tax eliminated, all federal tax eliminated. Which means abolishing the IRS. And best case scenario, we'd slash spending and we wouldn't replace it with anything. But I'm in the camp that let's improve on what we have, and in my opinion, a drastic improvement is to do all those things and replace it with one federal consumption tax. In this case, I'm embracing the fair tax, and I hate to use that word because there is no tax that's fair. Granted, no argument. But I think if none of us had to deal with the IRS, if there were no income tax, if there were no corporate tax, I think tens of millions of jobs would get created in this country. And I do see that as a pathway to zero taxes, because nobody is going to raise the only federal tax that we would have. Spending. We need to slash spending. We need to balance the federal budget now. And that means dramatically reducing spending to the tune of 30 cents out of every dollar that we're spending. During the debates, the question was asked of all the Republicans, would you trade 90 cents of spending reduction for 10 cents worth of revenue increase. You know, I watched the debates. Wasn't in them. I got to watch them. And I try and play a game. How would I answer that question? Well, they all answered no. They wouldn't do that. If it would have been me up there on stage, I would have said, you're asking me a hypothetical to address the biggest problem that this country is facing? You're asking somebody who's never raised a penny of tax in 8 years in office, not one penny of tax, if I would take 10% increase in revenue for 90% reduction in spending? Hell yes, I would do that. To me, that's just common sense. I think we are going to experience a monetary collapse. And very simply, that has to do with the Federal Reserve and the fact that right now we're printing 30 cents out of every dollar that we're spending. The Treasury market is really not a market at all. It's manipulated by the Federal Reserve buying up our own debt, and mortgage securities are also being bought up by the Federal Reserve. So I'm asked my advice. What do you do in the face of a monetary collapse? And a monetary collapse, very simply, is when the dollars we have don't buy a thing because of the accompanying inflation that goes along with spending 30 cents that we don't have out of every dollar that we spend. Well, one is whatever you're planning on buying, buy it now, because it'll never be cheaper. Goods and services are going up, and we know it. The notion that there's no inflation, I think, is crazy. I bought a can of sealer the other day at the hardware store, $47. 5 years ago, it was $32. That's what we're all experiencing. The other thing is sell government debt. If you own government debt, sell it, because it's going to collapse. The bond market is going to collapse at some point. That is what's going to happen. Military intervention. Let's stop with our military interventions. Just stop. The unintended consequences of our military interventions are that we have hundreds of millions of enemies to this country that would not exist but for our military interventions. Drones, drone strikes. We don't hit just the target. We kill hundreds of innocent civilians every time we do this. And these civilians that we kill, these innocents that we kill, have friends, they have family, they have co-workers, and those friends and those family and those co-workers, they vow vengeance against the United States, up to and including giving their own lives to achieve that vengeance. This is what we've done to ourselves. Military spending. How do you balance the federal budget if you don't cut the military by 30% or more? But you start. You start with 30%, which is something that has never happened before in the history of this country. And you know, if you cut the military by 40%, you know what year we go back to military spending to achieve those kinds of cuts? 2003. Really draconian, really draconian. And you can't address balancing the federal budget without addressing Medicaid and Medicare, which are absolutely out of control, entitlements that have no cap. And why did we have them in the first place? Why did it happen in the first place? Well, we've got it, and right now what we need to do is live within our means, or we're going to find ourselves without a country. And I realize what gets advocated here, and not that I'm in disagreement, but let's make it, I am involved in this process to try and make things dramatically better. And best, no, better, yes. Education. Well, what's the best thing the federal government can do when it comes to education? Well, it would be to abolish the Federal Department of Education. It's just crazy. Federal Department of Education, established in 1979 under Jimmy Carter. Tell me anything that's been value added about the Department of Education since it has been established. The federal government gives each state about 11 cents out of every dollar that every state spends, but it comes with 16 cents worth of strings attached. What we don't understand, and when I say we, not you, as a country, what we don't understand is that it's a negative to take federal dollars, the unintended consequences. National Defense Authorization Act. I would have never signed the National Defense Authorization Act, which allows for arrest and detainment of U.S. citizens without being charged. Where's the due process? Where's the due process in all of this? Patriot Act. I would have never signed the Patriot Act. I would look to repeal the Patriot Act. Where is the due process? I would have never established, well, never would have signed the Patriot Act, so there would be no TSA. I would have never established. What would you have had with a president not being adverse to vetoing legislation? Well, in my case, never had Homeland Security. Never had the Department of Homeland Security. It's crazy. Free markets. Genuine free markets. Let the airlines, let the airports, let the states, let the municipalities handle airport security. You want to fly on an airline that's perfectly safe, you have to get naked, you have to go through a strip search and a visual search. Maybe some of you want to fly on that airline. I don't. I want to go through a metal detector at a brisk pace and get on an airplane. That's what I want to do. Right now, I'm involved with Our America initiative. We are taking, we are being very activist in trying to promote marriage equality across this country. I think that it is a constitutionally guaranteed right on par with civil rights of the 60s, and that it's not a state's issue, it's a federal issue because it is guaranteed under the U.S. Constitution. And I know this is a really divisive issue. It's hugely divisive, but abortion. As difficult as the issue is of abortion, I believe that that difficult issue lies with the woman involved, and that the woman involved should be making these decisions and no one else, not the government. Immigration right now is front and center. I got to tell you, as a border state governor, let me start with a premise. Immigration is really a good thing. We are a country based on immigration, and immigrants are just looking to help their families. They're looking for the American dream. They're coming across the border, and they're working really, really hard. So what we ought to do when it comes to immigration, first and foremost, we should make it as easy as possible for somebody that wants to come into this country and work to get a work visa. Not a green card, not citizenship, but a work visa. And a work visa would entail a background check, so we don't have criminals coming into this country and work. The notion of building a fence across the border, that's about the dumbest thing I have ever heard in my entire life. Going to build a fence 20 foot tall. That's a 22-foot ladder. Well, let's just build it 80 foot tall. Let's just spend $2 trillion to build a fence. Let's build it 80 foot tall. I got to tell you, there will be Mexican entrepreneurs that will dig tunnels everywhere through that thing. And you and I will pay. Those that want to get across will get across that way. I'll help. And then border violence. Border violence. Do we not recognize that border violence is a prohibition phenomenon? Legalized marijuana arguably arguably 75% of the border violence with Mexico goes away. And then so much of our concern is well, illegal immigrants don't pay taxes. Well, what if we didn't have any taxes? What if we had a... Okay, improvement. This is improvement, all right? What if we had one federal consumption tax? Nobody's going to avoid paying one federal consumption tax, whether you're illegal, legal, a visitor, or a U.S. citizen. Bitcoin. Drug policy in this country. I really believe that we should legalize marijuana now, and Colorado and Washington State have done that. This is fantastic. These are the first two dominoes to fall when it comes to drug policy. I really believe that 90% of the drug problem is prohibition related, not use related. That's not to discount the problems with use and abuse, but that should be the focus. I was on the chairlift this winter, riding up the chair with this guy. He looks over at me and he goes, "Man, you look like Gary Johnson." I go, "Geez, I get that all the time." He said, "Nah, you're not Gary Johnson. He's a lot bigger." He said, "You are Gary Johnson, aren't you?" I said, "I am." "Would you smoke a joint with me, man? I am so honored to be on the chair with you." Nah, that's not my thing. I don't smoke, I don't do drugs, but I'm working really hard to make that happen, that you might be able to do that. So prohibition. Prohibition is the killer. I had a conversation with an editor of a major United States newspaper. He said, "I was in college. I smoked pot. And I walked into the grocery store and the pictures of the roaches on the roach repellent cans came alive, and you want to legalize this stuff?" My point exactly. You wanted a little beer weed, you got LSD weed. What if it were labeled? Prohibition. This is prohibition. Steve Jobs says LSD was his, without LSD, he would never have been the creative human being that he was. In the 60s, people were taking LSD and jumping out of windows. Well, that was a prohibition phenomenon. You know, a dose of window pane acid in the mid-60s visually was about half the size of your fingernail. Well, these people were taking sheets of LSD and thought they could fly and jumped out of windows. That was a prohibition phenomenon that killed people. One huge issue when it comes to the legalization of marijuana, and it really hasn't shown its political head, but it's going to, and that is impairment, all right? None of us want to see somebody impaired get behind the wheel of a car and put other people in harm's way. Correct. But politicians right now, they missed the boat on stopping legalization in Colorado and Washington State. So now what they're coming up with is 5 nanograms in your bloodstream, in your urine. You are impaired. Well, you're not impaired under 5 nanograms. I say this tongue-in-cheek. The world was a different place. But I have smoked marijuana. I have drank alcohol. And the reason I started smoking pot in college was it was such a safer alternative than alcohol. There was like no side effects to smoking pot. So as much marijuana as I have ever smoked, I shouldn't have gotten behind the wheel of a car, but I did. Different time, different space. But as much marijuana as I've ever smoked getting behind the wheel of a car, you know what? I'm following the speed limit, not going less than the speed limit, not going more because I don't want to get picked up. I'm driving between the lines. I'm obeying all the traffic signs. I don't know where I am, but I know that if I keep driving, it'll come to me, and it always did, and it always did. So the issue of impairment is really a big issue, and it's going to rear its head, all right? You know, I get this all the time. So then you want to legalize heroin, too, I guess. Well, heroin... I point out, Zurich, Switzerland. Zurich, Switzerland, you can get free heroin. You know, you have to have a doctor's prescription, but you get free heroin. The idea was death, disease, crime, corruption was going to plummet. No more overdose. No more disease, no more hepatitis C, no more HIV, clean needles, a dose of heroin that's not going to kill you, no more robbing and stealing to have to pay for it, no more women involved in prostitution to have to pay for it. You know, the chief of police from Zurich, Switzerland was in Albuquerque, and he was in Albuquerque for a drug conference, and he said, when they came out with this program in Zurich, Switzerland, I've been involved in law enforcement my entire life, so have all my friends. We could not have been more opposed to free heroin. Death, disease, crime, corruption, it was going to skyrocket. He said, I'm here today to tell you that Zurich is a much better place to live today. The death, disease, crime, corruption has stopped. I think that with Colorado, with Washington, with us legalizing marijuana, that we're going to understand that there are other approaches to this, and there's going to be some dramatic improvement in drug policy in this country. Our America Initiative is also taking some stands in many, many states to try and thwart gun control legislation. I don't know how the U.S. Constitution could be any more clear about you and I being able to own guns. After Aurora, I made a personal pledge to myself, which I have not fulfilled yet, but will, and that is to get my concealed carry permit in New Mexico, something that I was actually able to sign into law. I want to be in a position to be able to potentially stop something like this from happening. Nobody wanted to hear after Columbine. Everybody's clamoring for the solution to these problems. And this is what I said, and I said, oh, I'm going to get crucified for this. But that was what I did, you know. Crucify me. I'm going to get crucified for this. Nobody wants to hear the solution, but the solution is to make it mandatory that teachers have a gun in their desk. Not that it's going to prevent these tragedies, but potentially has the possibility of limiting the impact of this significantly. There's the IRS scandal right now. Well, I'm advocating eliminating the IRS, so that would go away. But as governor of New Mexico and as president of the United States, I controlled all the agencies. I controlled all rules and regulations, and I want to say that rules and regulations got better on a daily basis, and better was just less time and less money to have to comply with things that the government came up that just added time and money to our lives. So when this IRS scandal hit, and this is a constantly replaying record, scandals in government, bureaucrats taking on initiatives that they shouldn't take on, heads should roll. People should be fired, and Obama hasn't fired anybody. And I'm not talking about rank and file now that carries out orders. I'm talking about whoever instigated this should be fired, and this is the great control that you have as the chief executive. It's something that Obama has never really utilized. I'm going to end here with Johnson's 7 principles of good government, and then I think we're going to open it up to questions, comments, any insults that any of you have. But number 1 is become reality-driven. Find out what's what and base your decisions and actions on that. Number 2 is always be honest and tell the truth. It's really extremely difficult to do any harm to anybody who's willing to tell the truth regardless of the consequences. Number 3 is always do what's right and fair. The more you accomplish, the louder your critics are going to become. Learn to ignore your critics and continue to do what you know is right. Number 4 is determine your goal, develop a plan to reach that goal, and then act. Don't procrastinate. Number 5, make sure everybody who ought to know what you're doing knows what you're doing. Communicate. Number 6, don't hesitate to deliver bad news. We all make mistakes. Fess up to the mistakes and move on. That's how you deal with it. And then lastly, get a job that you love. If you don't have a job that you love, quit. And get one tomorrow that you'll enjoy getting up and doing what it is you do with your life. I first became aware of the Free State Project when the Free State Project gave the governor's office in New Mexico a questionnaire when I was governor. Would you like to see this community happen in New Mexico. I read it. Absolutely. How do you make this happen? So when I saw it ended up in New Hampshire, I knew that I would love New Hampshire, and I love the Free State Project. I love all of you embark on what is the grandest experiment. Thank you. And then lastly, don't give up your activism. Thank you for what you do. Your friends, your family, your coworkers, they are looking to you for answers because you take the time to look into these alternatives. You have a different viewpoint, and it's something that people are really, really hungry for. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for all that you do, and please continue to do what you do. Thank you. Very kind, thanks, thanks.
Hey, thanks for coming to New Hampshire, Gary. I'm Jay Noon. I'm a property tax and an income tax non-participant, and I have been my whole life. Now, you spoke with my father, Spud Noon, at Live Free or Die rally here a few times, and he talked, quite a bit about you to a lot of people. The one thing that got you a lot of boos here was talking about the fair tax. Essentially, the idea is to have the fair tax pretty much replaced with the IRS, collects in revenue. But in 1986, Reagan put together his Grace Commission. I don't know if you're familiar with that. And what the Grace Commission had determined, and the quote's not exact, but it was something like, not a nickel of what the IRS collects goes to any government service whatsoever. And I believe what they had determined was that it goes to pay off the interest on the fraudulent national debt. So if the national debt was wiped out, because it's all fraud anyways, quite similar to what Iceland did, there would be no need for the IRS at all. Well, there is no need for IRS anyways. So there would be no need for a federal fair tax. And as far as founding fathers were concerned, what I believe is this country was created so the average American, the free sovereign men and women, didn't have to pay any taxes, had no tax burden, and that burden was only on the corporations and import tariffs, and basically what our founding fathers called as a situs. And the definition of a situs is a place of business or a place of crime, such as previous to 1940s, the only property tax was on in the 1800s was on a blacksmith shop, but it wasn't on Farmer Joe's 30-acre farm that he had a few cows at. It was on the actual the businesses that were creating these incomes and stuff. So as for the fair tax, I pretty much hear everybody here is against that because I don't see it's necessary. Oh, sorry. So I don't know. I mean,
Well, so let me be clear. If I were president of the United States and legislation were presented to me to eliminate the income tax, corporate tax, IRS, and replace it with nothing, I would sign that legislation because I would be signed on to reducing the spending that went along with that. That would involve the slashing of that spending. But I'm going to just argue that what I'm espousing here is a tremendous improvement over what we currently have, and that's my argument.
And I agree with that. So, sorry, it was more of a rant than a question.
Hi, Gary. I'm really curious, what type of crony capitalism have you experienced? Can you tell us a couple of anecdotes of what it looks like from the inside? Well, how does crony capitalism occur? Did you see it? Did it try to appeal to you?
So what I brought to the equation was the only political office that I've ever run for, well, governor twice and then president once, is my pitch was issues first, politics last. So when I was governor, I want to say that crony capitalism was dead. I really want to say that it was dead. It was alive, it was dormant, but it was dead. It didn't happen. But I see it. I understand it. My successor in office, I believe, that's what it was all about. That it's all about donations to political candidates and favors that go along with that. In my case, my first primary cost me $550,000. 510 of it was mine, and 30 of it came in the last couple of days because it appeared as though I might win. So there was no quid pro quo. This was the notion was you're not going to get you're just going to donate to good government, and that was the experience I had. It was like the Prince and the Pauper. I had the royal seal, and I really didn't know what I was doing other than crony capitalism wasn't going to exist, and it didn't. So it can go away. Not go away, dormant. It can become dormant. That I have learned leaving office.
Governor Johnson, thanks so much for coming here. I really enjoyed your talk. I would like to know on a personal level, what do you see as the evidence that democracy is a good path to a free society?
Well, we don't live in a democracy for starters. So democracy is, democracy. You can vote yourself a raise, and you can vote yourself a Learjet, and it doesn't end up working. So we don't live in a democracy. We live in a republic, and the republic is governed by laws, and in this case, that would be the U.S. Constitution.
So you agree that democracy is not a good path to a free society?
It doesn't end up working. Democracies haven't worked.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, Governor Johnson. Thanks a lot for coming out here. I actually saw you a few months back in Salt Lake. Your anecdote about stoned driving reminded me of a joke, which is that drunk drivers run past a stop sign and kill a family, while stoned drivers stop at the stop sign and wait for it to turn green.
Just that it's going to be really interesting to see the government engaged in establishing impairment levels. That's going to be very, very interesting, and we're going to get to see it played out.
Governor Johnson, New England has been hit with violence events that everybody knows about. We had the Sandy Hook shooting, the Boston Marathon bombings. There has been a big knee-jerk response that keeps saying gun control, gun control, gun control. Some other people are saying we don't have a gun issue in this country, we have a mental health issue in this country. What are your take on the recent events, and if you were sitting in the White House right now, what would you like to see changed in this country?
Well, a lot of things that I would like to get changed, but the whole notion of okay, I'm President of the United States. Would I like to see a dialogue on keeping guns out of the hands of the mentally ill? Yes, but what's that going to be? Is that going to be a mentally ill test that all of us are going to have to take? And I guarantee you, if all of us have to take it, some of us are going to be mentally ill. And we're not going to be able to have a gun. So the unintended consequence of government and legislation, I'd like to think that as bad as I am, as booed as I deservedly should be, that I took a stand that went out further than anybody else I've ever heard of in politics on all this stuff. And not far enough, not far enough. I'll be the first to, going to PorcFest. Yeah, I'm going to go there and get on the spit. I'm going to go get roasted. Make me a better human being. Make me a better spokesperson. fair tax.
Governor Johnson, back in 2011, you spoke at the Baltimore Campaign for Liberty, where someone asked if you would abolish the czar system if you were elected. And you
Abolish
said
the what?
The czar system.
The czar system. Oh.
The czars. It was a big issue at the time. And you said you wouldn't because they would be your czars. Have you changed your position since then?
No, czars is a way, so chief administrator, governor, president of the United States, you get to run government. You control all the agencies. How do you do that? Well, you control that with the people that you have surrounding yourself, not only the heads of the agencies, but the people that you directly surround yourself with. Obama calls those people czars. I would never call them czars, but I would have those same kinds of people to manage this behemoth. To what? Yeah, right. No, you can have people that are just as. I guarantee you that if I were president of the United, well, as governor of New Mexico, not one single job was predetermined. Not one. It was come apply for any job, and I was so amazed at the qualified people that showed up. So I'm president. I get elected president of the United States. I want to cut the military by 42%. I guarantee you that there will be so many qualified people line up to get that job that will have that same philosophy and make it happen. I guarantee you. Don't underestimate the power of the executive in lieu of any legislation whatsoever.
Hello, Governor. It's Jeff from the Unschool Bus. And a few years ago, you announced that you were running for president, and then Brink Slattery brought you over to a little bus in a parking lot. And I'm at this point where I'm wondering, are you going to be announcing again? And what are your intentions?
Well, right now, I wouldn't be up here, and maybe somebody can take my place. Okay, somebody come take my place tonight, right now, take it. But that place is nobody's providing a voice at the presidential level for what I'll call a broad brushstroke, which is fiscal responsibility, social tolerance, acceptance, military non-intervention. Republicans right now at the presidential level that label themselves as Republicans/libertarians, in my opinion, have a social agenda that back to social engineering. I don't care how you live your life. I really don't care, as long as what you do doesn't put me in harm's way. If it does, then that government has a role. Where's that voice? Where is that voice? I'm it.
Hello, Governor Johnson. My original question was going to be why legalization and not decriminalization, but I see where you're going. I guess a cure for cancer isn't as important as determining an intoxication level. But I really want to know if you're willing to hold the Kissingers, the Bidens, the Obamas accountable in, say, a Nuremberg-type trial.
Any government official that violates the law should be held accountable. And my door is open to understand what those violations are and how that might proceed. I don't want to discount. That is the power of the presidency, and it's an important one. Any chief executive.
Hello, Mr. Governor Johnson. My question regards your desire to ensure at the national level something like marriage equality. And at present, the only thing I can figure that would matter to anyone who would give a flying crap about federal recognition of their marriage are all the goodies that you want to eliminate along with it. So I wonder why on earth you would advocate it at the national level. Why, exactly. Why should government be involved in marriage whatsoever?
So initially, my stance was get government out of the marriage business completely. Why should? But then come to find out that there are literally thousands of laws on the books that discriminate against same-sex couples, and a lot of that has to do with the tax code. And if you're going to say that get government out of the marriage business, what in essence you're talking about is you're talking about thousands of pieces of legislation that have to get submitted to Congress to change the language of marriage, as opposed to recognizing marriage equality. Not one single line of federal law would have to get changed. So, go ahead. I'm sorry.
If you get rid of marriage, none of those laws mean anything anymore.
No, they would all still exist. Every single law that exists right now would have to get amended, and it would mean thousands of pieces of legislation that would have to be changed to get government out of the marriage business in lieu of just recognizing marriage equality. With one Look, I'm just telling you the reality here.
So my question...
Government does not need to be involved. That's correct. But the reality is that if you're going to get government out of the marriage business, you're going to have to change thousands of lines of federal law, one piece of legislation for every change in that particular law. It ends up to be, from a reality, it's just undoable.
Governor Johnson, my question was actually along similar lines because both my boyfriend and I back in 2012 voted for you and supported you in part due to your position on marriage equality. And ideally I would like to see, of course, the federal government out of marriage entirely, but I realize there are certain benefits in regards to immigration and tax reasons. But I guess then my question becomes, do we need a federal government to begin with? Why can't we see why can't we see 50 completely independent laboratories of innovation?
Well, the role of the federal government, period, is to oversee the Constitution of the United States. So if you left it to 50 states, would we still have segregation today in certain states? I think we would. And that it is a constitutional issue, so federal government, has this role of enforcing the U.S. Constitution. That we all live under the Constitution. Supposed to.
Hi, Mr. Johnson. Thanks for coming to PorcFest. You're really brave for being a politician and being here. You deserve credit for that, at least. Although I do believe a stateless society is the solution to everyone's problems, I just wanted to make note of one thing. You said teachers should be mandatorily allowed to have a weapon in school. I lost a really good friend in Sandy Hook, and to not verbatim quote her father, he said, if my friend was able to have a weapon in Sandy Hook, that wouldn't have gone down the way that it did. And if anyone could have had one there, if it was just a possibility, deterrence would have done something. So, yeah, not everybody's against you.
So, one more question, we'll wrap it up. Everybody's breathing relief, sigh of relief.
Going off of what Neil said, and I'm Laurel, by the way. Going off of what Neil said about 50 independent states, what would you do in the situation that a state were to secede?
I think my crystal ball is that that's actually going to play itself out with the monetary collapse. I see all that evolving. There's the federal government's. You know, there are a lot of particulars that would have to go along. I'm not trying to be a politician here. I'm trying to be a common sense human being that would give the right response given the right input. I really don't know what that input is. I mean, what? No violence. No violence.
Gary Johnson!
Songs as I write you this letter, of days past and days yet to come, and the message of freedom, the message of freedom. I stand at the edge of the pages of history and lessons unlearned. It feels like these pages are remaining unturned, but boys, it's no mystery. Children, I'm sorry to leave you this world in a state of disaster. It was given to me in a similar state.